I always believed that after 26 years of marriage, there could be no secrets left between us. I thought I knew every line on my husband's face, every story behind his scars, every reason for his silences. But when the phone rang at 2:17 a.m. on a rain-soaked Thursday, and the hospital's voice told me that Daniel was gone, I realized how little I truly understood about the man I'd built my life with. The world, once so solid, shifted beneath my feet. I was left with a house full of memories, a heart full of questions, and a single, echoing phrase that haunted me: never go to the farm. Anna, promise me. He'd said it only twice in all our years together, but both times with a gravity that made me shiver. The first was on our honeymoon, when I'd asked about the faded photograph of a white farmhouse tucked into his wallet. The second was after his mother's funeral, when the lawyer mentioned the old property upstate. Each time, Daniel's eyes had darkened, his jaw set, and he'd squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. Promise me, Anna, never go there. And I had promised, because love is sometimes about respecting boundaries you don't understand. But now, with Daniel gone, the promise felt like a chain. The day after the funeral, I found myself wandering the house in a daze, touching his shirts, his books, the mug he'd left on the kitchen counter. I was searching for something, comfort maybe, or a sign. Instead, I found a letter, hidden in the back of his sock drawer, addressed to me in his careful, slanted handwriting. Anna, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you, and for the secrets I kept. There are things I never told you, things I was afraid would hurt you or change the way you saw me. But you deserve the truth, even if it comes too late. Go to the farm. All my love. Daniel. I read the letter 3 times, my hands trembling. The words felt like a key, unlocking a door I'd been forbidden to open. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder, what was Daniel hiding? Why had he kept the farm a secret for so long? And why, after all these years, did he want me to go there now? The next morning, I called the lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, a man with a voice like gravel and a heart of gold. He sounded surprised when I mentioned the farm. Your husband left instructions, he said after a pause. He wanted you to have the deed. It's all in order. Taxes paid, property maintained. He even left you a set of keys. There was a rustle of papers, then a sigh. He was very specific, Anna. He wanted you to see it for yourself. I drove upstate the following Saturday, the keys heavy in my pocket, Daniel's letter folded in my purse. The drive was long and lonely, the landscape shifting from city gray to rolling green hills. As I neared the address, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the radio. The road narrowed, trees arching overhead, until finally I saw it, a white farmhouse, weathered but sturdy, standing alone at the end of a gravel drive. I parked the car and sat for a moment, staring at the house. It looked almost exactly like the photograph I'd seen all those years ago, except older, the paint peeling in places, the porch sagging slightly. The air was thick with the scent of rain and wildflowers. I felt as if I were trespassing, not just on Daniel's past, but on something sacred. The key turned easily in the lock. The door creaked open and I stepped inside. The house was silent, dust motes swirling in the sunlight that filtered through lace curtains. The furniture was old but cared for, a worn sofa, a grandfather clock, a dining table set for 2. On the mantel, a row of photographs, Daniel as a boy, a stern-faced woman I recognized from his mother's funeral, and a man I'd never seen before, his eyes shadowed, his arm around a much younger Daniel. I wandered from room to room, searching for answers. In the kitchen, I found a stack of unopened mail, all addressed to Daniel. In the study, a desk covered in ledgers and notebooks, each one filled with Daniel's neat, precise script. But it was the upstairs bedroom that stopped me cold. The room was painted a soft blue, the bed neatly made, a quilt folded at the foot. On the nightstand, a small wooden box, locked. Next to it, a photograph of Daniel and a little girl with dark curls and a gap-toothed smile. I stared at the picture, my mind racing. Daniel had never mentioned a daughter. We'd tried for years to have children, suffered through heartbreak and loss, and finally accepted that it would be just the 2 of us. Who was this child? I sat on the edge of the bed, the photograph in my lap, and wept. For Daniel, for the years we'd lost, for the secrets that now pressed in on me from every corner of this house. When the tears finally stopped, I wiped my eyes and reached for the wooden box. The key from Daniel's letter fit perfectly. Inside, I found a stack of letters, each one addressed to Emily. The first letter was dated 20 years ago. My dearest Emily, I hope someday you'll understand why I had to leave. I never stopped loving you. I think of you every day, love. Dad, I read letter after letter, my heart breaking with each word. Daniel had a daughter. He'd left her, for reasons I couldn't yet understand, and he'd kept this secret from me all these years. I sat in that blue bedroom for what felt like hours, the letters spread out around me like fallen leaves. Each one was a piece of a puzzle I'd never known existed, written in Daniel's familiar hand, but addressed to a stranger, a daughter I'd never met, whose name he'd never spoken. The words were full of longing, regret, and a love that seemed to ache through the paper. He wrote about birthdays missed, milestones unshared, and the hope that one day she might forgive him. There were no explanations, only apologies and memories, a favorite song, a lost tooth, a day at the lake. I tried to imagine Daniel as a father, tried to reconcile the man I knew with the man who had written these letters in secret. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I wandered back downstairs, the photograph of Emily clutched in my hand. I needed answers, but I didn't know where to start. The study seemed the most likely place, so I returned to the desk and began to sift through the ledgers and notebooks. Most were filled with numbers, expenses, repairs, lists of crops and livestock, but tucked between two ledgers, I found a thin, leather-bound journal. The first entry was dated the year before Daniel and I met, April 3rd, Emily's birthday. She's 6 today. I sent a card, but I doubt her mother will let her see it. I wish things were different. I wish I were braver. The entries were sporadic, sometimes months apart, but each one was a window into a life I'd never known. Daniel wrote about the farm, about the loneliness that settled over him after his marriage ended, about the pain of leaving his daughter behind. He wrote about meeting me, about the hope I brought into his life, and the guilt he carried for the family he'd left behind. The last entry was dated just a few months before his death. I'm tired. The past feels heavier every year. I want to tell Anna everything, but I'm afraid. Afraid she'll hate me, afraid she'll leave. I hope she'll understand someday. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. I felt anger, grief, and a strange sense of betrayal. But beneath it all was a deep, aching sadness for Daniel, for Emily, for the years lost to silence and fear. I wondered where Emily was now, if she'd ever received any of the letters, if she even knew her father was gone. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the floor. I stood at the window, watching the light fade from the fields, and tried to make sense of everything I'd learned. The farm, once a place of mystery and fear, now felt like a monument to Daniel's sorrow, a place where he'd hidden his pain, and perhaps his hope for redemption. A sudden noise startled me, a car pulling into the driveway. My heart leapt into my throat. I hadn't told anyone I was coming here. I watched from the window as a woman stepped out of the car, her hair dark and curly, her movements hesitant. She looked up at the house, then down at something in her hand. For a moment, I thought I was seeing a ghost. I opened the door before she could knock. We stood facing each other, the silence thick between us. She was younger than me, maybe in her late 20s, with eyes the same shade of blue as Daniel's. She held a letter in her hand, the envelope worn and creased. "Are you Anna?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm Emily," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I got a letter from your husband." "My father?" The world seemed to tilt. I reached for the door frame to steady myself. Emily stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the house, taking in the photographs, the furniture, the life that had been built here in her absence. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know if I should come." "But the letter?" "He said you might be here." I led her into the living room, my mind racing. We sat across from each other, the silence stretching between us. I wanted to say 1,000 things, to ask 1,000 questions, but all I could do was stare at the woman who was both a stranger and somehow family. Emily broke the silence first. "I didn't know much about him. My mother never talked about him, except to say he left. I always wondered why. I always wondered if he ever thought about me. I handed her the stack of letters I'd found upstairs. She took them with shaking hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. "He wrote to you," I said softly. "All these years, he never stopped thinking about you." She pressed the letters to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "I wish I'd known. I wish he'd told me." We sat together in the fading light, two women bound by love and loss, by the secrets of a man we'd both loved in different ways. The anger I'd felt began to soften, replaced by a fragile sense of understanding. Daniel had made mistakes, terrible, painful mistakes, but he had loved us both, in the only ways he knew how. As night fell, Emily and I talked. She told me about her life, her mother's bitterness, her own struggles to find her place in the world, the emptiness she'd always felt. I told her about Daniel, about the man I'd known, the life we'd built, the dreams we'd shared and lost. We laughed, we cried, and slowly the distance between us began to shrink. By the time the moon rose over the fields, I felt something shift inside me. The farm was no longer just a place of secrets and sorrow. It was a place of possibility, a place where healing might begin. The next morning the farm was shrouded in mist, the fields silvered with dew. I woke early, the events of the previous day swirling in my mind. For a moment, I lay in bed, listening to the quiet, half expecting to hear Daniel's footsteps in the hallway, his voice calling softly from the kitchen. But the house was silent, save for the distant call of a mourning dove. I rose, wrapped myself in a sweater, and padded downstairs. Emily was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, Daniel's letters spread out before her like a map of lost years. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red but clear. "I read them all," she said quietly. "Every word. I never knew he cared so much. I always thought he'd forgotten me." I sat across from her, unsure of what to say. There was a heaviness between us, but also a strange sense of relief, as if a wound had finally been exposed to the air. "He never forgot," I said. He didn't know how to fix things." Emily nodded, tracing the edge of a letter with her finger. "I wish he'd tried. I wish he'd come back even once. But I guess it's too late for that now." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Eventually, Emily spoke again. "Why did he leave? Do you know?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "He never told me about you." "Not until now. But I found his journal upstairs. He wrote about the divorce, about how hard it was to leave. He said he was afraid he'd make things worse if he stayed, afraid he'd never be able to give you the life you deserved." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "My mother always said he left because he didn't care, that he started a new life and forgot about us." I shook my head. "That's not true. He carried you with him every day. I think he was just lost and ashamed. He wanted to tell you, but he didn't know how." She wiped her eyes, managing a small, sad smile. "I guess we both lost him, in different ways." We finished our coffee in silence, the weight of the past pressing down on us. But as the sun rose higher, burning away the mist, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward, together. After breakfast, we decided to explore the farm. The air was crisp and clean, the grass still wet beneath our feet. We walked the perimeter, past the old barn and the orchard, the silence between us now companionable. Emily asked questions about the farm, about Daniel, about the life he'd built after leaving. I answered as best I could, sharing stories and memories, trying to fill in the gaps. At the edge of the property, we found a small cemetery, the stones worn smooth by time. Daniel's parents were buried there, along with a handful of other relatives. Emily knelt by the graves, her fingers brushing the names carved in stone. "I never knew any of them," she said softly. "It's strange, isn't it, to have a whole family you never met?" I knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to love you, even when it's hard." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "Do you think he wanted us to meet? To know each other?" I thought of Daniel's letter, of the way he'd written my name, the way he'd asked me to come to the farm. I think he did. I think he wanted us to find each other, to find some kind of peace. We sat there for a long time, the sun warming our backs, the silence filled with unspoken words. Eventually, we made our way back to the house, our steps lighter than before. Inside, I found a stack of legal documents on the kitchen counter. Daniel's will, the deed to the farm, instructions for the lawyer. I realized with a jolt that the farm now belonged to me. But what did that mean, now that I knew about Emily? Should I keep it? Sell it? Share it with her? The questions pressed in on me, heavy and insistent. Emily must have sensed my unease. "What will you do with the farm?" she asked, her voice tentative. I shook my head. "I don't know. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I didn't even know it existed until a few days ago." She looked around, her gaze lingering on the photographs, the furniture, the traces of Daniel's life. "It's beautiful here, peaceful. I can see why he loved it." I smiled, surprised by the warmth in her voice. Would you want to stay? At least for a little while?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I think I would. There's so much I don't know about him, about this place. Maybe we could figure it out together." A sense of relief washed over me. For the first time since Daniel's death, I felt a sense of purpose, a reason to stay. Maybe the farm could be more than a monument to secrets and sorrow. Maybe it could be a place of healing, a place where new memories could be made. That afternoon, we cleaned the house together, opening windows to let in the fresh air, dusting off old furniture, sorting through boxes in the attic. We found more photographs, more letters, more pieces of Daniel's life. Each discovery brought us closer, weaving a fragile bond between us. As evening fell, we sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. "Thank you," she whispered, "for letting me in." I squeezed her hand, my heart full. "Thank you for coming." The farm, once a place of secrets, was slowly becoming a place of hope. The days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm, as if the farm itself was teaching us how to breathe again. Emily and I woke early, making coffee in the quiet kitchen, sharing stories as the sun crept over the hills. We worked side by side, tending the neglected garden, mending a broken fence, sweeping dust from corners that hadn't seen light in years. There was comfort in the routine, in the simple act of doing things together. Each task, no matter how small, felt like a step toward reclaiming something lost. One morning, as we cleared out the barn, Emily found an old trunk tucked behind a stack of hay bales. The lock was rusted, but with a little effort, we pried it open. Inside were relics from another era, faded baby clothes, a pair of tiny shoes, a music box that played a lullaby I didn't recognize. At the bottom, wrapped in a yellowed blanket, was a stack of drawings, crayon portraits of a man and a little girl, stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. Emily stared at the drawings, her eyes shining. "I remember these," she said softly. "I used to draw them for him. He'd put them on the fridge, even when they were terrible." I smiled, imagining Daniel's pride, the way he must have cherished each scribbled masterpiece. "He kept them all this time," I said. "He never let go." She traced a finger over one of the drawings, her voice trembling. "I wish I could remember more. I was so young when he left. Sometimes I wonder if the memories I have are real, or just stories I told myself." I reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "They're real. And now you have proof." We spent the afternoon sorting through the trunk, piecing together fragments of Emily's childhood. There were birthday cards, a lock of hair tied with a pink ribbon, a photograph of Daniel holding a toddler in his arms, both of them laughing. Each item was a testament to a love that had survived distance and time, a love that had never truly faded. Later, as we sat on the porch, Emily turned to me, her expression serious. "Do you ever wish things had been different? That he'd told you the truth sooner?" The question caught me off guard. I thought of all the years I'd spent with Daniel, the life we'd built together, the secrets that had lain between us like a shadow. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I also know he was trying to protect us, both of us. Maybe he was wrong, but I think he believed he was doing the right thing." Emily nodded, her gaze distant. "I used to hate him for leaving. I blamed him for everything that went wrong. But now, I don't know. I think I understand him a little better." We sat in silence, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and earth, the sounds of the farm settling for the night. I felt a sense of peace, a sense that, despite everything, we were exactly where we needed to be. That night, I dreamed of Daniel. He stood at the edge of the field, his face illuminated by the moonlight, his eyes full of sorrow and love. He reached out to me, his hand warm and solid, and whispered, "Thank you." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but my heart felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. The next morning, Emily suggested we visit the local town. "I want to see where he grew up," she said. "Maybe talk to someone who knew him back then." We drove into town, the landscape rolling past in shades of green and gold. The main street was quiet, lined with old brick buildings and flower boxes overflowing with petunias. We stopped at a small cafe, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else. As we entered, a bell chimed, and a woman behind the counter looked up, her eyes widening in recognition. "Anna, is that you?" she called, wiping her hands on her apron. I blinked, surprised. "Yes, it's me, Mrs. Callahan, right?" She hurried over, enveloping me in a warm hug. "It's been years." "I heard about Daniel." "I'm so sorry, dear," I introduced Emily, explaining as best I could. Mrs. Callahan's eyes softened as she took in the resemblance. "You must be Emily. I remember when you were just a baby. Daniel used to bring you in for ice cream on Saturdays." Emily smiled shyly. "I don't remember, but I wish I did." Mrs. Callahan sat with us, sharing stories of Daniel's youth, how he'd worked at the hardware store, played baseball in the summers, helped his father fix up the farm. She spoke of his kindness, his quiet strength, the way he always put others before himself. "He was a good man," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He made mistakes, sure, but don't we all? He loved you both, in his own way." We left the cafe with full hearts and a sense of connection to the past. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked back to the car. "I'm glad we came," she said. "I feel like I know him a little better now." As we drove back to the farm, I realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about understanding it, about finding grace in the spaces between what was and what could be. The days grew longer, the air thick with the promise of summer. Emily and I fell into a rhythm that felt almost natural, as if we'd always belonged to this place and to each other. The farm, once a symbol of Daniel's secrets, was slowly transforming into a sanctuary, a place where grief and hope could coexist, where the past could be honored without overshadowing the future. One afternoon, as we were sorting through a box of Daniel's old tools in the barn, Emily paused, holding up a battered leather notebook. "Look at this," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed with age. Inside, Daniel's handwriting filled every line, but these entries were different from the ones I'd found in his journal upstairs. These were lists, names, dates, phone numbers, addresses. Some were crossed out, others circled in red. "What do you think this is?" Emily asked, flipping through the pages. I studied the notebook, a sense of unease prickling at the back of my neck. "I'm not sure. Maybe people he knew from the farm? Or business contacts?" Emily frowned, tracing a finger over one of the names. "This one's familiar. I think my mother mentioned her once, Aunt Ruth. She used to help out when I was little." We decided to investigate, driven by a shared need to understand the full scope of Daniel's life. That evening, we called a few of the numbers, introducing ourselves and explaining who we were. Some calls went unanswered, others were met with confusion or polite disinterest. But when we reached Ruth, her voice trembled with recognition. "Emily, is it really you?" she asked, her words thick with emotion. "Yes, it's me. I'm at the farm with Anna. We found some of Dad's things, and your name was in his notebook." There was a long pause, then a sigh. "I always hoped you'd come back someday. There's so much you don't know, so much Daniel never told you." We arranged to meet Ruth the next day. She arrived in the late morning, a small woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She hugged Emily tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You look just like your father," she whispered. We sat in the kitchen, the sunlight streaming through the windows, as Ruth began to fill in the missing pieces of Daniel's story. She spoke of the early years, when Daniel and his first wife, Laura, had tried to make the farm work, They loved each other, but life was hard, Ruth said. Money was always tight, and the farm needed more than they could give. When Laura got sick, Daniel did everything he could, but it wasn't enough. She left, took Emily, and Daniel was never the same. Emily listened in silence, her hands clenched in her lap. "He never told me any of this," she said softly. Ruth nodded. "He was ashamed. He felt like he'd failed you both. When he met Anna, I think he saw a chance to start over. But he never stopped loving you, Emily. He just didn't know how to bridge the gap." I felt a wave of compassion for Daniel, for the impossible choices he'd faced. "He wanted to protect us," I said, echoing the words I'd spoken to Emily before. "But in trying to protect us, he built walls that kept us apart." Ruth reached across the table, taking both our hands in hers. "You have a chance now to break the cycle, to build something new. Don't let his mistakes define you." After Ruth left, Emily and I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of her words. The truth was messy, complicated, but it was also freeing. For the first time, I felt like I could forgive Daniel, not just for the secrets he'd kept, but for being human, for making mistakes, for loving imperfectly. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily and I walked the fields in quiet companionship. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. We talked about the future, about what to do with the farm, about the possibility of staying, of making it our own. "I don't want to lose this place," Emily said, her voice steady. "It feels like the only real connection I have to him. And to you," I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Then let's keep it. Let's make it ours." We spent the next few days making plans, repairing the roof, planting a new garden, painting the porch. Each task was a small act of hope, a way of claiming the future for ourselves. The farm, once a place of sorrow, was slowly becoming a place of belonging. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Emily turned to me, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Anna, for everything. I know this isn't what you expected, but I'm glad you found me." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm glad you came. I think Daniel wanted us to find each other. Maybe this was his way of making things right." The farm was quiet, the only sound the distant call of an owl. I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool night air, and felt a sense of peace settle over me. The secrets that had once haunted this place had been brought into the light, and in their place, something new was growing, something strong and beautiful and true. Summer deepened, and with it, the sense that the farm was slowly coming alive again. Emily and I found ourselves busier than ever, mornings spent tending the vegetable patch, afternoons mending fences or painting the old barn, evenings sharing stories over simple meals on the porch. The work was hard, but it was honest, and each day left us a little stronger, a little more certain that we belonged here. The land once neglected responded to our care. Tomatoes ripened on the vine, wildflowers bloomed along the fence line, and the orchard buzzed with bees. One afternoon, as we were clearing out the attic, Emily discovered a battered suitcase tucked behind a pile of dusty boxes. She dragged it into the light, her brow furrowed with curiosity. "Should we open it?" she asked, glancing at me. I nodded, my heart thumping with anticipation. The suitcase creaked open, revealing a trove of old photographs, letters, and mementos. There were pictures of Daniel as a young man, grinning beside a tractor, his arms slung around friends I didn't recognize. There were faded postcards from places he'd visited, ticket stubs from concerts and county fairs, and a stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon. Emily untied the ribbon, her hands trembling. The letters were addressed to Daniel, written in a looping, elegant script. She read the first one aloud, her voice soft and hesitant. "Dearest Daniel, I hope this letter finds you well. I think of you often, especially when the wind rustles through the apple trees. I wish things could have been different between us, but I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Take care of yourself, and remember that you are always in my heart. With love, Laura." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She wrote to him. All these years, she wrote to him. We read through the letters together, piecing together the story of Daniel and Laura, a story of love, loss, and longing. Laura had remarried, moved to another state, but she had never forgotten Daniel. Her words were full of forgiveness, of hope that one day Emily might find her way back to her father. As we finished the last letter, Emily looked at me, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think she ever wanted to come back? To see the farm again?" I considered the question, thinking of the pain and regret woven through Laura's words. "I think she wanted peace. For herself, for Daniel, for you. Maybe she hoped that someday you'd all find your way back to each other." Emily nodded, her gaze distant. "I wish I could talk to her. Ask her about the things I don't remember." I reached for her hand, offering what comfort I could. "Maybe you still can. Maybe it's not too late." The discovery of Laura's letters brought a new layer of understanding, a sense that the past, while painful, was also full of love. It reminded us that forgiveness was possible, that healing could come from unexpected places. That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the fireflies, Emily spoke quietly. "I want to try to reach out to her. I don't know what I'll say, but I think I need to." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. "I think that's a wonderful idea. You deserve answers. You deserve to know your whole story." The next day, Emily wrote a letter to her mother, pouring out her heart in words that were raw and honest. She told her about the farm, about finding me, about the letters and the memories we'd uncovered. She asked questions she'd carried for years, questions only Laura could answer. We mailed the letter together, standing side by side at the small post office in town. As the letter slipped from Emily's hand into the mailbox, I saw a weight lift from her shoulders. She smiled at me, a real, unguarded smile, and I knew she was ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with a quiet anticipation. Emily checked the mailbox each morning, her hope mingled with anxiety. We kept busy, throwing ourselves into the work of the farm, but beneath the surface we were both waiting. One afternoon, as we were weeding the garden, Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her eyes widening. "It's her," she whispered. She wrote back. We sat together on the porch as Emily read the email aloud. Laura's words were gentle, full of love and relief. She apologized for the years of silence, for the pain her choices had caused. She told Emily about her own struggles, her regrets, her hopes for reconciliation. She wrote of Daniel, of the love they'd shared, and the sorrow that had haunted them both. Emily wept as she read, her tears falling onto the page. When she finished, she looked at me, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I feel like I finally understand, like I can finally let go." I hugged her, holding her close as the sun set behind the hills. The farm, once a place of secrets and sorrow, had become a place of healing, a place where the past could be honored and the future embraced. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of Daniel. I hoped he knew that his secrets, once so heavy, had led us here, to forgiveness, to understanding, to love. I whispered a silent thank you and drifted into a peaceful sleep, knowing that we were exactly where we were meant to be. The weeks that followed felt like a gentle unfolding, as if the farm itself was breathing easier now that its secrets had been spoken aloud. Emily and I continued our work, but it was no longer just about mending fences or planting seeds. It was about building a life, together, from the pieces Daniel had left behind. The house grew brighter, the rooms filled with laughter and conversation, the kitchen alive with the smells of baking bread and fresh coffee. Even the old barn, once a place of shadows, echoed with the sound of our voices as we made plans for the future. Emily's relationship with her mother began to heal too. They spoke on the phone every week, sometimes for hours, sharing stories and memories, filling in the gaps that years of silence had left. Laura even sent old photographs, Emily as a baby, Daniel holding her in his arms, the three of them together on the porch of the farmhouse. Each picture was a gift, a reminder that love, though sometimes lost, could be found again. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching a summer storm roll in, Emily turned to me, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked. "About going back to your old life?" I considered the question, letting the sound of rain on the roof fill the silence. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I remember how I felt when I first came here, lost, angry, afraid. This place changed me. It gave me a second chance. And now, with you here, it feels like home. Emily smiled, her eyes shining. I feel the same. I used to think I didn't belong anywhere, but here, with you, I feel like I finally do. We sat together, watching the lightning dance across the sky, the air thick with the scent of rain and earth. I thought of Daniel, of the choices he'd made, the pain he'd carried, the love he'd tried so hard to protect. I wondered if he could see us now, two women, once strangers, now family, finding peace in the place he'd once called home. As the storm passed, a rainbow arched over the fields, its colors vivid against the darkening sky. Emily laughed, her voice bright and clear. He would have loved this, she said. He always said rainbows were a sign of hope. I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. Maybe it's his way of telling us we're on the right path. The next morning, we received a letter from Daniel's lawyer. The estate was finally settled, the farm officially ours. There was a sense of finality in the paperwork, but also a sense of freedom, a chance to shape our own future, unburdened by the secrets of the past. We celebrated with a picnic in the orchard, spreading a blanket beneath the apple trees. Emily brought out a bottle of wine, and we toasted to new beginnings, to forgiveness, to the family we'd found in each other. The sun filtered through the leaves, dappling the grass with gold, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. As summer faded into autumn, the farm transformed again. The fields turned golden, the air crisp and cool. We harvested apples, pressed cider, and prepared the house for the coming winter. Each day brought new challenges, but also new joys. A stray cat adopted us. A neighbor stopped by with fresh eggs. Emily learned to bake her grandmother's bread. One evening, as we sat by the fire, Emily pulled out Daniel's old guitar. She strummed a few chords, her voice tentative at first, then growing stronger. I joined in, our voices blending in a song neither of us quite remembered, but both somehow knew. The music filled the house, echoing through the rooms, carrying with it the memory of Daniel, the promise of tomorrow. As the first snow fell, blanketing the farm in white, I stood at the window. Watching the world grow quiet, Emily joined me, her arms slipping around my waist. "We made it," she whispered. "We really did." I smiled, tears prickling my eyes. "Yes, we did, and I think he'd be proud of us." The farm, once a place of secrets and sorrow, had become a place of hope, a place where love could grow, even in the shadow of loss. We had faced the truth, forgiven the past, and built something new. And in doing so, we had honored Daniel's memory, not by clinging to what was lost, but by embracing what could be found. As the days grew longer and the light returned, I found myself looking forward, not back. The future was uncertain, but it was ours to shape, and whatever came next, I knew we would face it together, stronger, wiser, and unafraid. If you've made it this far, thank you for sharing this journey with us. Stories like ours are everywhere, stories of loss, of secrets, of second chances. If you're carrying a secret or searching for forgiveness, know that you're not alone. Healing is possible, even when it seems out of reach. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to open a door, to read a letter, to reach out to someone you've lost. If this story touched you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed your life? Or found hope in an unexpected place? Your stories matter, and we'd love to hear them. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing in the power of new beginnings. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.